Alright, the Blue Storm Supreme Dragon has finally returned after so many sets, so let's begin. But first, let's start off with the encounter generic for non-strides, Dancing Cutlass. Ironically, the clan that this card belongs to can't even use it for D series. But anyway, it's a grade 1 with key power and the skill is count. If your Vanguard has a clan and you have no face-up cards in the G-Zone, it gets all these following abilities, where auto, win this card from hand during the Riot phase or main phase, costs Energy Blast 3 and draw a card. Basically, it's like the generics for the Energy Blast 3 to draw, but in a way better for the encounter decks because it could even be discarded during the main phase, which Maelstrom actually will do. But the second skill is Act Drop. Cost, remove 2 copies of itself from the drop zone and countercharge 1. Luckily, it's not restricted to not countercharging during the turn, but it is very helpful for certain decks. But right now, it's only Maelstrom that can play this if you're playing D series. Just find it funny that the clan that this card belongs to can't even use this card. And then we go to Tier Knight Elecrinus, which is a grade 2 with 10 power, and the first skill is that your Vanguard is Aqua Force. This card is also treated as Aqua Force. This does stay important, especially for your ride line search, so keep that one in mind. But the second skill is Auto. When placed on rearguard, while your Vanguard is Aqua Force, click a top 7 card to your deck to choose up to 1 Maelstrom or up to 1 Blue Storm Armada card, reveal it and put it to your hand, of course, over your deck. If you reveal a card, put a card from your hand to your soul or discard it. Just like all the other cross rides, most of them are just gonna tell you to ride the cross ride grade 3 and just put the original into soul from the main deck. And of course, here's the one way to do it so far. But regardless, this part is already very strong. The fact that you just call this at a grade 2 turn and you could just search your key pieces right off the bat is just very helpful. But the second skill makes it even better because it's auto rearguard. At the end of battle, this card attacked. If you have at least a grade 3 Vanguard Maelstrom, cost count plus 1, choose one of your rearguards and swap this unit's position with that one. So once again, Aqua Force played more column swapping than restanding rearguards, at least to differentiate with Flagberg Big, which is what I kind of like, but just overall a very strong support card. Searching for key pieces, which is of course going to be very key, and also just doing the key stuff for the column swapping for your attacks. And now let's cross ride to Blue Storm Supreme Dragon, Glory Maelstrom, which is grade 3 with 13 power, and the skill is Count Vanguard. During your turn, if your rearguard or soul has a Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom, this card gets all its act abilities and all your front row units get plus 5k power for each Blue Storm Armada card in your order zone. Like I said, here's the skill that requires you to have the original, and it already makes a good bonus because this actually solves part of Aqua Force's problem right now for D, where the units are lacking power. But now with this actually helps out with some of the power problems, especially since it stacks. And the part where it gets original Maelstrom's act abilities. That skill is very helpful because that's another multi-attack skill. And already another thing I kind of like is that it doesn't have to be from soul. It could be from rearguard as well. So depending on scenario, sometimes you will want to call that Maelstrom to rearguard, but most of the time you do want to keep it at soul, hence that grade 2 that will put it in soul. But if you have no choice, it's not too bad to call it. But the second skill is Auto Vanguard. When your Blue Storm Dragon Maelstrom attacks, until the end of the turn, it gets plus 5k power. And if it's at least the 4th attack, you also draw a card and then choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. So basically, this is to replicate the original Maelstrom skill, except that it's just given to the Maelstrom rearguard. So that might suck a bit that you have to now run even more copies of the original Maelstrom because you also need the original Maelstrom as rearguard as well. But it is nice that Glory Maelstrom gets to inherit this skill as well, in a way. I would kind of like it if it also gets the auto skill, so you don't need to just give this skill to the original Maelstrom for the rearguard attack, but it's not too bad either because you do need the rearguard attacks anyway. And let's not forget the power buff for the 5k Maelstrom attack also lasts for the whole entire turn. So if you do the first attack and then just commit the 4th attack, it keeps the 5k for the rest of the turn. And let's not forget the first skill as well, because on average it's going to be a 10k power buff, especially for the final skill where Act Vanguard, when your Maelstrom attacks, cost rest 2 Blue Storm Armada cards from your order zone, and your opponent cannot call Sentinels from hand to Guardian until the end of the battle. Finally, the Blue Storm Armadas have more meaning to it. The first skill stacks their power, and the third skill basically guard restricts. And the funny thing is, the third skill is not hard once per turn, so you could technically do it for 2 Maelstrom attacks if you have 4 Blue Storm Armadas. And once again, Glory Maelstrom inheriting the guard restrict, which is something I like. Overall, I do really like it despite having maybe some consistency issues because it requires the original Maelstrom. In fact, you might need multiple copies because of it. And spacing might also be an issue as well, considering there's a lot of key pieces in Aqua Force. But it does solve some of its issues, like the power problem, along with basically the guard restrict for a good finisher. And also keep in mind one more thing is that this one doesn't require its own attack number, so that's also key. So overall, it's a cool new addition, and I say definitely play this. And now finally, we got our new generic front trigger, which are double rare. rares, so that's unfortunate. But they all have 0 power, so that does suck that you can't even use these as rear guards, although unless if you need the boosting part. But they all do the same thing, where when you put it at Guardian after it's getting retired, you put in Soul instead, which can actually be very useful depending on which deck you play. There are certain decks that might be Soul heavy and do play front triggers, so having these in those decks might not be too bad. But I would say I rather ask for more defensive options. And finally, here's the secret rare, and next week we got Gandiva Mask. So that's it for this review of Glory Maelstrom. What do you guys think of it? Overall, I'm very excited for Glory Maelstrom, and I'm happy to see what they did with it. Good that they made use of the original Maelstrom, and in fact they even made use of the Tear Dragon part of original Maelstrom, and the idea of using multiple Maelstroms to annihilate your opponent. Probably a bit of an anime reference there, and the part where Glory Maelstrom is basically a finisher with a guard restrict. Solve some of the issues too with the massive power up and making use of some of the other old support cards like the Blue Storm Armada, because it was always weird that Blue Storm Armada kind of did nothing after its use. So I'm glad that they finally made even more use of it and it has more meaning to it now. But on that, that's it for this, and see you next time.